Round three.
Round three. A little bit of sadness, but Eric has said that he will be available for us to, next year, which I'm looking forward to. I think your whole knowledge is growing and developing new things in your lectures, but we appreciate you coming out and doing this very much so. It's great to have you here again, and I'm sure everybody's also feeling safe. So here we go. I'm going to hand it over to this.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
And thank you for having me too, because in having to prepare every time, it helps me to wrap up a lot of things. Things are in the air, and having to present something obliges me to condense it a bit. I'm just going to
Yeah.
do that a little bit for the sound. Is that okay? Yes. Okay, what I'd like to do today is recap a little bit. And we talked about what we are, part of a universal system, compensation, etc. I'm going to recap a bit. And now say, okay, what have we learned? What are the conclusions? How does that make us see things? Of course, it's an interpretation. A way of seeing things is a philosophy, and the way I'm going to look at it is with the concept of boundaries. And that's why it's called the philosophy of boundaries that is behind the Energyneering exploration in a way. Okay? So that's the idea. I don't think we'll play with situations. I'll talk more of examples and try to condense it. But we can interact, as we normally do. Okay, on our first talk, we realize that we are human beings that are connected to the earth, to the universe, and that the energies are coming together. And what I drew was a kind of a model where you had the universal energy, the earth's energy, the earth's field in a way. There was a line with here what I call the universal source or intelligence, the intelligence behind the universal system. We go to the universe itself, the soul, there's the earth here, earth connection, and there we come as the spark that gives rise to what we are, each of us. When that takes place, there is kind of a natural field that establishes that is like our presence on earth with its reality. What we are and what we attract to us. That energy, I'll take it away, extends in what I call the etheric link, part of the energy etheric layer that gives rise to a person with a body and manifests the person that we all are. Okay? And then what we show and we understood is that that system is in equilibrium and it responds to what is around itself. So when there are memories activated or trauma remembered, or we meet somebody or we see something, that system is in fact responding. It's affected by it. When we talked about compensation, we played on that concept in fact. We said we all in equilibrium with something. When something happens there and there, I compensate to maintain my equilibrium. I drive on the road. And in fact my car doesn't go in a straight line because I constantly compensate without knowing that when you learn to drive you feel it. Or if you have a car with a plane, the steering wheel, you realize how difficult it is to keep it going, and you go like this until you get the knack of it. When we stress, we become less able to compensate. So we start to go more erratic, let's say. And when we can't control it anymore, in other words, when we collapse, we somehow go off the road, crash the car, and then we will move in a new reality. We now walk. Or once we had that, Angelica and I, we were camping, and our car had a wheel bearing issue. So the car became a cupboard that we could lock. And we walked until we had the parts that we needed. We were in a campsite, but our car wasn't a vehicle anymore. It was a new reality. We could lock things in it, and we had to walk around. Okay? So mostly that's what we've talked about last time, in the last 2 times. Realizing that we are part of a universal system and responding to an equilibrium. Okay? What I'd like to look at today a little bit is, maybe I need to go a bit further, how we respond to things is linked to our memories, our experiences, what we believe in, our values, what we want. I wanted to go to the movies and my daughter decides to watch the ducks in the pond. If I'm strong on the movie, I will not be able to enjoy my daughter in the pond. So that will now, she will punch holes in my system because I go crazy because I really want to watch my movie. So my ability to flow will dictate how I respond. My makeup is part of it. My ability to compensate, to stay on the road, is also very important. Okay. Take that away. Now what I'd like to somehow introduce is a concept of boundary. So, let's say that's a person, me for example. So, if you ask me if I eat meat, yes. If I don't know, like to go to discotheques, no. So we start to have a boundary for different things. There are things that fit in, there are things that fit out. I am a human being. So if you take human beings, I'm part of them. At least I hope, I think. If I'm part of the males, yes. I'm a mammal. I'm not an ovipar animal. So I can start to classify and realize that I have a certain belonging to certain ways of looking. But my boundary would have a certain immunity. Like mothers, for example. Mothers have access to us when we're very small. They tend to walk through very easily through the boundaries. In a beneficial way, sometimes not in a beneficial way. Because something can walk through my boundaries without disturbing me. That's when we talked about the flu last time. Or it can really disturb me in the sense that I catch the flu and my system becomes affected by what is moving in. If I approach something that has a boundary, I would normally notice that there is something. So let's say I drive in a driveway and I don't see anything. I drive over, I'm sure all the time, a lot of ants or little weeds and things like this. For my perception, these things are not that noticeable if I notice from here. If I see a person in the middle of the driveway, I'm more likely to get a signal that's meaning something to me and stop or go around it. So I have to recognize what I'm dealing with. So when I meet people, I meet a boundary. There's a lot of noise there. Can you close the windows? It's like defocusing. Decide to invade us. So you have people, you meet somebody, like a relationship type of issue. You meet somebody you like, we come closer. You have a relationship, you go closer. You get married, you start to have a life in common. You then start to overlap some parts of your life. You start to say, we meet, we come closer, do something together, you start to share things. When you have, let's say, what I would call a normal relationship of a couple or a family, you start to have an area of overlap. You're sharing a home, finances, decisions, and that type of thing. What happens sometimes is people simply overlap one another. The systems blend into one another, which some people are researching. They think it's a fusion with somebody else. Sometimes another energy maybe gobbles us. But when you start to overlap, you lose your sense of identity. So now the person that you met and that you liked, you can't see anymore so well. Because it's now in you, part of you. You don't get what we had before, the pleasure of the interaction, because you're starting to interact with yourself anymore. And often what happens then, people go and look outside to have a little affair or something because they meet somebody again. But they do that using that common space here. So now it creates a boundary issue again. So in that relationship, in a way, each has to take care of its own identity and boundary. So that's somehow healthy, that can be as well, but that's not too good. And of course, if it's too far away, then maybe there's not much of a relationship. That becomes an acquaintance. It's a different situation. But it's all about the immunity of these spaces. So we all have that space, that boundary, that represents an immunity. Okay? Health is an ability to respond, to stay on the road, and to maintain that boundary. Because there are many situations I can meet in life that will make me lose my boundary. I work for a boss, I don't know how to deal with authority, I lose my boundary. Because maybe I was in a situation with my father or my mother, and I associate, and I lose my boundaries suddenly. So it's very situational, all these things. Okay? It's nothing different from what we've talked about before. It's just, now I'm looking at it as a space, as a boundary. But now, we said we all alive in the middle. So we all part of the universe. We are a product of that universe. So we all one, aren't we? We share that space of life. And in a way, we all live. But although we all one, I can identify Rob and Butch and Cyril and Joel and Martin. We're not one. It's a bit of a confusion, eh? But we can pass the flame of love, like the flame of a candle to each of us. We all contain it. So we're all one, but we also are different. It's a bit of a paradox of identity, because now what? What do I do with that? Okay?
It's more or less a common sense of purpose, maybe, in that particular field. I'm sitting here now. Everybody is not focused on what you said.
They could be. It could also be that we all here, but we all a different expression. Angelique gave me the answer, a good answer yesterday. She said, if you look at any part of me, you'll find the same DNA. If you take my hair, my nail, my skin, my liver, my heart, you will identify that this is my DNA. But my hair and my heart are very different things. Same DNA, different purpose. So we could make that analogy. Same DNA, different purpose. Different expressions of a system. So we are maybe, analogy, a blood molecule of the universal system. But we don't understand that reality because we are absorbed into our physical reality. We've been taught about our physical reality. So we are seeing life on earth. I must have money, I must have shelter, I must be, I mustn't be sick, I must go to the hospital. So that reality now is made to my physical system, but it's bigger than that. Okay? So in theory, if I stay in here, I'm okay. I carry the flame, I express what I am. I should be somehow peaceful and comfortable with that. Maybe. But then things happen. I had a client recently. She is okay, but she has money issues. And talking with her, she has a gambling problem. She sometimes goes to casinos, she works in the field of casinos, and she will gamble and create a debt, and she can't control it, like a switch. But she often goes to casinos and nothing happens. So it's a sometimes trigger that makes her spend a lot of money. Now she has a debt. She estimates if she doesn't gamble, she would spend 3 to 4 years to pay it back. And of course, the temptation is to go and gamble to pay it. But there's pressure from family now. Sister doesn't want to talk to her, that type of thing. So she comes to me. Now, what happened there was something interesting because I found, okay, this space I would show the vertical energy, and that's the etheric link, and that's the person. So that's the being with the person. Okay? What I found is that energy was like this. That was like there but not there. A person was there in the space of gambling. Because out of the space of gambling, she's in a different space. And there was something here, a vertical energy. Like what I would normally call an entity. An entity being a deceased person, but sometimes a reality that we create ourselves. I can create a reality, I can create a fear, I can create things that are very alive in me. So they are virtual entities. And my little drawing for that is this. So that's a virtual entity that takes me away from there. Something I've created, and if it was in line with this, it would be in there. If it's not, it's out. So she's now on her own in what I would call a fire, and her energy is used to feed the fire. But what we found is that reality is in fact not really hers. Her father had a certain belief, and his belief was that life never provided what was needed, and that they could never get what they needed in life. And that reality, over a boundary, if you want, was governed by that boundary of the father, so it became part of her. It's not really hers, it's an overlap. Like on Photoshop, you can blend pictures. So it's adding that belief of the father on her. Now, when she starts earning money and going well, it's out of that belief. That's not hers, but that's riding her. So what she does is she starts moving out of herself here. And she goes and gamble to spend the money to make the belief true. Compensation. As we discussed last time. So we ended up working with the boundary with father and a bit of the history of family to detangle what was making this happening. And at the end of the time, it came to make that realize its identity and in a way come back to alignment. Okay? Now I don't know if it's final, because then we had to find the switch. There was a trigger. And we tried to carry on and we did what we could. And now behind that it's about go and live, see what happens, make your choices. If it happens again, let's talk again, because there might be other aspects. That's only the one that we could find about that. But what was important for me is, in fact, it's a duality again between the universal space and what we can create for ourselves. So, are we there or are we here? And of course we go in art, in art, in art, in art, in art, because we all have these realities. There are spaces we go, we jam. Okay? There's another, and that became a little pattern that now became an understanding of that. You could call that a fire in a way. let's look at collective things. Money, for example. What do we generally believe in our society? If I don't have money, I'm stuck. Can't do anything, I'm blocked, I'm limited. So it's a reality that we believe in, we've been trained to it, we see it all the time. It's real. It's real for our society, and money is a virtual thing that we created. I don't think money is part of that. Money is a creation of humans. So we buy into that concept, and then we feed it. But it's a collective concept. And we keep it alive by buying into it. Individually, we can decide and try to move out of that and come back to a different reality and start to believe in another way, position ourselves differently towards it. It's a choice, but it's not that easy, because I'm going to think I made the choice. Something will happen and I fall back into it. But that's part of the dynamic of me learning to make a choice, for example. So it's about these boundaries, eh? There's a lot of things out there. Do I buy into them or not? But because I grew into them, they are part of me. So later in life I have experiences and I realize that it's difficult to realize as well. I'm part of that fire. Do I want to be part of that fire? No, yes. How do I get out? How do I stay in? Depending on what it is. But generally, when we are in a space like this, we'll be more centered, more in harmony, things will have a better impact on us. Here will be more survival. Because we feed something outside of us, so we move out of what we are. From that model point of view. Tricky, yeah? I'm going ahead with things. Now, having done that, I realize I can choose for life or survival. But when I'm in the fire, I can't differentiate. If I'm in a difficult situation and I struggle and I buy into it, what else can I do than try to survive? It's my reality. I'm stuck. Unless I can have a glimpse of rebuilding something, or I can find a hand or somebody to talk to clarify things. Okay?
Just for maybe the young people thinking, each one has turned into life. We've got certain roles we play. With a father, we're a worker, we entertain, we act different roles in different situations, right?
Yes.
So, in other words, do we at that time, playing all these difficult roles, are we constantly moving out, and do we always have to return back or to attain the one that we had?
I'm going to say it a bit differently.
Okay.
When I think, because it's now, you see, it's like in mathematics. You make a supposition and then you try to validate it. Eh?
Yeah.
I think that when we hear, we generally find the experience to be peaceful and maybe comfortable or meaningful. Not always comfortable. When we are there, we get a bit exhausted and we don't wish to go back there too often. So if you have a difficult relationship with a child, for example, you might want to say, oh, I don't want to go there anymore. We're going to fight again. So you try to stay here, but when he arrives or she arrives, you get pulled into there. Which is, I call it a fire. And we all try to avoid these fires. But some people like the fire, because in the fire, they can blend the energies with yours, or use your energy to feed their fire. And that is the tricky part. You find that sometimes people are in a difficult space, and they start to poke. Because then you start to join that, and you give them the energy they need to find a bit of peace. But it doesn't help you, because after that you finish, and next time you say, oh no, not that one again.
Vampirism.
Huh?
Vampirism.
Yes, somehow. And in these dynamics are constant. We all do it when we're in difficulty. They go and punch a hole into something that's going well, upset the other person, and then say, we don't feel too good after, but now we settle and we say, okay, I'm sorry, it's fine, but we got that. I don't know if it's satisfaction, but a sense of, okay, now I can cope. I upset you, now I can cope. Okay?
Yeah, I will.
If I'm going fast, so we have to talk a lot today. What I'm trying to do now to say, right, all of that is starting to make me look at something. I'm part of the universe. It seems that what is in the cosmos is inside of me. In other words, the order of the universe is alive in my cells that are creating my body. They have to be coordinated to maintain that skin. And to also have others for the liver. And the cancer is when they start to multiply erratically, for example. So there is that intelligence that's flowing through. And if I acknowledge that, I'm now acknowledging that I'm a product of that universal system. And I'm an expression of it. Like that skin is an expression of me, or my blood is part of me, that type of thing. So it takes me, if I acknowledge that and I start to believe in it, it will mean that I'm now surrendering in a way. I'm surrendering to the fact, you might say. I am part of that system. I'm an expression of it. The flame, I carry the flame, but I also have my role to play. Once I acknowledge that, I have to acknowledge that you guys are the same. Okay? So if I respect this in me, I'm now moving to have to respect everything around me as an equal product of that system. Okay? So now I'm moving to respect. I've got the value now. If I respect, I can't control too much. I can't start to dictate my will, my want to all of us. That was part of our discussions in the previous talks. Who am I to decide what's good for you? I can help you maybe to see things and to make choices, but I can't impose my choice on somebody else. So I've got to let go. Yes? It's a way of thinking, and now I'm stuck. Because I surrender, I lose my ego in a way. I'm a product of something. I now respect everything around, and I can't control. Well, how can I still do what I'm doing now when I move energies around to assist people to do things? Can I? Put me in an impasse, you know? Because I can just be now. Hi. And if you do things that I like or don't like, I simply have to say, not me, go and enjoy yourself. If you want to push me, I say, sorry, please don't push me. But I can't do much more than that. So it put me in a bit of a tiz as to what can I do, what can't I do. Yes?
So there's another aspect to it also where you have the concept of, when you're in a situation in life, it's like a lot of being riding under like in a surfboard. Below you is all the bullshit, with the waves and the turmoil and everything, and you are merely compensating like you're on a fucking bronco or so, on a wild bull.
Yes.
Whatever that happens below, you are compensating and keeping your curve above.
Mm-hmm.
So as much, no matter how much bullshit is going on, how much turmoil, you're always like a little boat bobbing on it,
Yes.
and maintaining your vertical or perpendicular to all the bullshit below.
And you are on the wave that you can't control anymore.
Yeah, you have to ride it out. It's not a question of saying, I choose this, I choose that. You have to ride out whatever bullshit comes, takes over the situation at
Okay.
a given time. At times.
So what you do now, you bring in my conclusion in a way is to say, okay, once I've done that, all I can do is right away trust the flow. So that puts me behind that to say, okay, now I trust the flow, I trust the wave, I go with it.
But there's another aspect to it also, because when the flow is all moving one direction over the precipice, you have to, in your small way, steer in some way to the sides that you don't go over the precipice with the flow.
That's the feel now, because now you see, it's a very good example. You trust the flow, and you see the wave you assume is going to go into a precipice. You say, stop! Control. The moment you start to control, you move out of respect. The moment you move out of respect, you start not to surrender. You say, sorry, now I'll take care of it. Because I'm going into a precipice here. And then you are on the other side of what we discussed as that little signature. Now you say, I'm out of here, I'm taking control.
There's a little yellow thing flashing here, is that?
That's okay. It will finish at the end, it will give you a
Okay.
screen. So, this is a tricky thing because it's quite challenging, but it seems to me, is the answer. But it's a bit bigger than what my intellect, my reference system allows me to really use. But I'll give you a story. I had a friend, and he was divorced, and he was really unhappy, I guess, if we were working together. Dissatisfied, it has to be like this and like that, nothing. And suddenly, he had prostate cancer. So I went to see him in the hospital, and I didn't know what the problem was, and he told me, this is serious, this is life-threatening. And it turned out he had prostate cancer, and they said, medically, 6 weeks, 3 months, you got it. So he was in hospital, they stabilized, and they used hormones, and he went out of hospital, and then he had to go for radiotherapy. And when he went for the radiotherapy, they put him on a table wanting to mark things on his body, and he said to the nurse, what's this, what that, and they told him, shut up, we're marking, that's what we do. And he said, okay, I'm out of it. But then he started to use his cancer in a way as an identity. So he would go somewhere and he would say, hi, I'm John, I've got prostate cancer. And he suddenly started to interact very differently and to live the life that he wanted. At work he was what we call boarded, so he ended up with a pension because they thought he's finished, he's gone. And he said, well then I'm going to live what I want. And a few months later, he was in remission. Remission. No more cancer. So of course they thought, what's going on? Remission. Lasted a few months, but then he went back into it. Because when he was not in the cancer, he was normal again. So he was back into his upset. He was a normal person. So the cancer gave him that identity. So then he moved back into that thing of living his life his way. He reconnected with his wife. He remarried his wife, gave her his pension, and then decided to die. But I talked to him in his last days. I called him and he says, look, I'm busy going. We'll see you in another time or whatever. Bye. He understood he was going. That's the last chat we had. Okay? Now you might say he still died 3 years later. But the life he had in these 3 years was really, he could express who he was. He could talk to people, tell them about what he believes, interact with people, be him. He didn't care. Now, the flow, you might say, yeah, trust the flow, now after cancer. Is that what you mean by trusting the flow? I don't know what I mean by that. But when you go with the flow, you somehow ride the wave. And if you ride the wave, you deal with what's in front of you, but you have that feeling of being alive, because you're more into that overlap. When we start to run against the flow, we still have the experience, we still washed out by the thing, but we exhaust ourselves resisting the flow and creating things on the side. So it becomes a choice. It doesn't matter, because synchronicity will always happen, experiences will be similar, or the events might be similar, but the experience we have in them will be very different. If he had the fight for life in the cancer, gone for radiotherapy, and only fight to save his life, he might not have lived 3 years, but that wasn't the issue. He would have been failing, surviving. What goes behind that for me then, I tried to put what is it that's important? Now it's a personal, because I think we all have to come to our personal conclusions. Me sharing means you say, oh, that's a good idea, I need to think about it. Maybe I can make sense of it, but you have to translate it into your own way for it to make sense to you. What makes sense to me might not be what feels right for you. Okay? So for me, I started to think, okay, what matters is to respect what I am. If I respect what I am, I respect the universal creation. But me as an individual, if I respect what I am, implies what we talked about. So in my life situations, in my work, in my choices, if I can respect what I am, meaning that universal being, everything that is around, and my role in there, I, in theory, would be on purpose and on focus and have a reasonably peaceful life, hopefully. But peaceful doesn't mean I avoid all accidents, cataclysms and things like that, but my attitude would be with the wind, or letting it flow, riding the wave and having fun where others are feeling rolled by the wave. But it doesn't matter what others feel, because I'm only aware of what I feel. I don't know, I can tune in what you feel, but I can't make that my focus. Life is a personal experience. Okay? If I go behind that, the work that I do now, or what can we do to make things work? As a person, when we have things that happen, we discussed that before, let's say there's something I don't like that happens. We talked about the child visiting, you say, oh no, not again. We could identify what we don't like and decide what we would like in place. For example, I don't like, I feel attacked, threatened, taken into pieces. What would I like? To be respected. Or to have a... But to be respected implies somebody must respect me, so that doesn't work. So I would have to ask, what would I feel if I was respected? I want to know my feeling. And I might feel peaceful, or I might feel happy about interacting with my son, as an example. Then I would start to invite that, because I realize it's an important thing for me to experience. And life in that sense is giving me messages as to what I'm attracting on the flow. And my response is showing me where I am with it. And then I can start to think, what would I like in place of this? In other words, turn the same experience into an experience where I feel something that matters to me. My work, in a way, is a facilitator, is assisting a person to see a dynamic, to reorganize boundaries, to move more into the life space versus the fires, and then start to make choices of what matters, life, what matters, versus surviving. And then it seems to give people a space where it's a bit clearer for a while, and when you see clearer, you make different choices. You go on holiday, and after 3 weeks you see life differently, and you decide something. But it's a personal integration. When you come back, of course the world is back in your face, but you carry that choice that you made. And that's what this is about. So we can never do it for others, but by talking with one another, we share things and we click. It doesn't have to be that you go and see somebody to help you. By talking to people, we discussed before, by watching a movie, we get messages that make us think, and then we make a choice. And all these little choices are helping us to find a space where we feel comfortable. In other words, to find a boundary that's comfortable. But we have to respect it for others to respect it. 2 years ago, we ended up with 2 little passions. They were a year old, a bit more, and it was wee and poo in the house, and we couldn't stop it. Now I realized, if they don't respect my space, maybe I'm not respecting it enough. Because if I was respecting it enough, maybe they would identify the boundary. So is it about kicking the dog, or is it about me starting to think of what my space means to me? Because I don't like when they poo and wee into it. So I went on that journey. I don't know if it worked or not, but today we clear off that, except at night, but we keep them in a confined area where we can clean. And we have less and less of that type of incident. But it's about respecting what we value. And it's difficult because we constantly get cycled into things. If we were talking, Butch and I, one day about diet and respecting your diet and your timing. Now, you go out with some people and they take you out of that. Now, you can do it once, knowing, okay, I know why I'm doing it, but somehow it's weakening a boundary. Either you weaken it and you say, whoa, that wasn't nice, I wouldn't do that again. Or you now weaken the boundary and you start to go out. So there's that question all the time of, yes, I want to respect others, but am I respecting myself? Am I prepared to go across that line simply to be with them for what they want? Or should I say, sorry guys, I have a line? Of course, when we do that, people are not that happy, are they? They apply peer pressure. Come on, what's your problem? Well, you know, I have a diet and I think it's not right for me, I need to do this. And then they of course displace it, and if we let it happen, or it's an example, we dilute a boundary. So do that for that, do that for something else, do that again for other things, going to see a movie you don't want to see, doing other things, and after a while, we're not left with a boundary that's very waterproof in a way. We've got a lot of holes in it. And now life becomes more difficult because these boundaries don't work, they protect us, they are our immunity. And we start to be affected by all kinds of things. And we don't know how to detangle because our boundary, our fence, is not filtering. And that is the difficulty of a society with eroding values or things, because we accept everything, which is quite cool, everybody can choose, but we get pulled in a lot of things that maybe don't serve us. And we can't really identify anymore what is and what isn't. And if you take young people, they like the funky thing, the extreme out of the norm thing that is erasing these boundaries to say, look, I can go out and I can live. Can they? Can we? And that's a personal choice. It's how we each responsible to manage our boundaries. And yes, as parents, we can give example and we can hope we teach boundaries to our children, but we can only share what we know, and it doesn't mean it's right. And then they have to decide what they do with the rest. And that's, in a way, the philosophy of boundary, to respect what we are universally, and to try to live like that as much as we can. That's my approach. And my, hopefully, contribution in interacting is to share that, and if I interact with people, to allow them to find their way versus my way. Because otherwise I'm moving out of here, and I think I'm the dude and I know everything and you must do it my way. And that's what you see with collective structures. Schools, families sometimes, churches sometimes, that become dogmatic. The gangs, the companies. You join a company, the reality rules, you have to feed it. These systems are beneficial and not. But I think that if they are beneficial, you'll have a signature like this, and you will not have that signature. So that's mainly, I think this is what I, sort of, what I had in mind. Maybe I've been a bit, I don't know if I've been too quick to it or not, or if you want to discuss some aspects or add to it.
There is probably, I think it's a question of balance with your particular character or whatever, let's say calm or the person you are, as a unique person, and each one has his own ways in which you could use it constructively. So this is one way of saying, all right, although each one is different, but this is the way we can take our choices, and which could be for the better, and just let go and lose out on it. So it sounds to me sense there's one way of looking at decision taking and living probably your life while you're here.
I don't think you ever lose. From a universal point of view, if you go against the flow, it doesn't matter, because the flow is going to flow. So it simply creates an experience for us. So it's a choice of an experience in a way.
How do you harmonize with the flow? How do you know where the flow is going? Because you have to make decisions, but how do you know your decision is against the flow or not?
Okay, I'm going to give you a funny answer. In a way, it doesn't matter. The only difference is your experience, is the flow of flows. But I think if first you need to have an intention, okay? But if you are confronted to things, what feels right is maybe where your flow is. Okay? So like we talked about, come for lunch with us, no, I want to eat my own way. If it doesn't feel right and people push you there, you might think you go against the flow, but you might also let it happen and find that, whoa, that was such an experience. I don't want to eat like I ate before, I'm behind this. So you have to trust, if things override you and you made that choice, even if it wasn't feeling comfortable, maybe there is something into it. So that is the ambiguity of this, because then you start to say, well, who cares anyway? What does it matter? I think what matters is how you feel.
It's also a complex reaction to stimuli, complex reaction to complex stimuli.
Yes.
Now, another little story as far as that is concerned. You know, we're all standing in line and we've got all these problems, and now you've got this massive boulder on the incline and you're holding it. And it gets more and more difficult and weighty. So the right thing is to do, hey, jump on the boulder, at least you can guide it where it goes.
Well, yes. Or maybe you can stop holding it.
Yes.
And look at the economy at the moment. Look at what America is busy doing. They try to, well, not only America, okay, it's the more visible, patch and try to do things. What about let it happen? It's okay, there's going to be less money around, but then the things are going to cost less as well. It's surely going to find a new equilibrium behind it. But of course, who's in control and not might change. So if you have, you're scared to lose, so you try to hold. If you consider money as heavy. And the more we force and we control, the more we struggle. Life becomes tough.
So what do? Take your money out of the bank and put it in the bed?
I don't know. You do what feels right for you. Because you can't predict what's going to happen, do you?
I think it's more important to assess what is important, what are the important issues, and what is the important things that are extremely important to preserve and to maintain. Those things one can hold and sort of prop up. The rest goes with the flow.
Yes. It's what I was saying, what matters.
Yes.
Like working with a person last week, it was confusion about there's traffic to go to work, I can go to work early, but then I don't like it. Later, I'm not too happy. Then I work too much and I don't have enough time for my family. So I said, well, what matters? is it the life you have or is it the work you have? And I don't care if you say it's the work I have versus the life I have, but you need to have that sense of chronology.
So you go with the flow, but you still make your decisions.
Of course,
Yeah.
you choose,
Yes.
but you choose as to what feels right. Now also, I think if we are on a certain desire, a certain wish, certain values, and with all our makeup, there's a certain flow, let's say, that aligns. When I change my choice, I think some way the flow changes. Although, if I talk to Dirk on astrology or maybe to Rob, they say, well, you can do whatever you want, but as a matter of fact, the flow is there. You have choices maybe to buy the pink car or the green car, but the flow is there. But how you choose and how you view it creates a very different experience. That's the thing that matters. I want to see the movie, my daughter enjoys the pond, and I really enjoy being with my daughter. If I can simply make the choice to enjoy the pond and let the movie go, I'll have a good day.
Yeah.
If I want to force the movie, I'll be late for the movie, upset, I will not have a movie, and I will not have the pond experience.
So you have the fun experience, you go see the movie.
Or you drop the movie because maybe that's, although that was my intent, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Then I drop it.
Aren't you letting your boundaries down? You have
Sorry?
these boundaries of things that you wanted to do, but now you're letting the flow almost punch holes in your boundaries.
You see, what I'm saying about wanting to do something is, why do I want to do it? To have an experience. So why did I want to see the movie as an example? Because I wanted to have the experience of enjoying the movie or see what it was. But there's another thing I enjoy, is to have time with my daughter. And that maybe is of more value to me now than to have the experience of the movie. So the flow is saying, I need to go with the flow. That when she goes off, I maybe need to trust that and say, okay, I'll stay and play with you. So now I'm in the moment. I take what comes. So I put things out. I'd like to see the movie. I'd like to have time with my daughter to keep it simple. And what comes to me and is the more obvious, I go with. Because that's the way the flow shows me the way.
I was thinking more in other examples where you shouldn't always be going with the flow. Sometimes you should stick up to it. And I keep on thinking of that, the whole church saying where they says, God help me to accept the things I cannot change and change the things I cannot accept. So there's some things you need to push back on. So, for example, when Hitler was starting the Second World War, the rest of the world had to push back. I know he started a flow, and the rest of the world had to push back on it.
But then you say, can I respect myself and let little walk over me?
Because the
I
flow,
can't really do that.
yeah.
So I've got to hold my space.
So you let it flow, but you still discern.
There's still?
Discern
Yes.
between right and wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think another big problem is that in most cases people tend to oversimplify the problem. They don't fully understand all the dynamics involved, because many of the dynamics is hidden.
Of course, and we are so much involved in them that it's very difficult to be aware of them all. Like, I'm aware when you do work like we did as examples, you only deal with one part of the dynamic that's available now. So it's not the whole thing we work with. It's a little part of it, but it's what we can do now. And the same thing is, this, as Joy said, if you can discern what feels right and not, you go with that. If it doesn't feel right to have Hitler invade your country, and he invades it, it puts you in a situation of choice. Do you let him or do you say no?
If you can mind your head, because if your mind goes and everything else goes.
But you see, if Hitler starts to invade my garden, maybe my boundary is not too good. Like, I'm thinking, you know the American
But
Indians?
boundaries work both ways, to keep things out, but also prevent things from going out
Yes.
in emergencies.
Look at the American Indian culture. They seem to honor all these values. But at the same time, they're really enforcing them to their people. And the Council of Elders is making choices for the tribe, and they have to obey what the elders decide, guided by spirit. But now they don't allow the young guy to have his free choice completely. They guide him into what the grouping has decided. It's a cellular thing, the grouping. Now, when America, the white America, started to build railways, etc., they went across the lines of that Indian culture, and in fact, you could say exterminated it. It couldn't hold it. So some of them started drinking and they lost it. Then they started fighting, they lost the battles, they got relocated, and now they start to have a flow again. If you read their things, I've read that, they think that it was good because maybe it was important to rejuvenate the culture, and now there are white people who are born into that culture. So it's spreading.
Yeah, but culture is a very regional thing.
Yes.
It only applies to the conditions at the times, under which people live. But you can't now take that culture out of context and expect to use it adequately elsewhere, where there are more modern, improved methods of solving problems.
It's compatibility again. But there's still a philosophy behind it. There's values that are important. And then it's to adapt to an environment. It's part of a challenge of Africa, I guess, that there's a culture, a Western culture with a civilization and technology, and there's an African culture which is thinking differently, which culture it isn't. That technology that's been created is not their culture. So for them, it's like they have to move into this culture and perform into this culture. I don't think we could perform into the African village culture. We
Well, we work within a framework of limitations, you see, so that culture either applies or doesn't apply.
Thank you, yeah. So what I think for me what that shows again is what feels right for me in a respectful way, and how can I honor what I am in the universal creation. And to me, however I can start to look at it from having played for a long time with these things, it seems to filter that way. But it's not something that I can totally grasp intellectually and always, but it's helping me to function better. And it seems to help others when we interact on that path. So there's something in it, but it's bigger than what I can really conceive.
Well, we're growing as well there. It's always developing and getting more complicated. Yeah.
When it's becoming, look, if you look at it, I don't want to, this is not religion, okay? But if you look at religions, they come to that type of philosophy. So this is a logical deduction from looking at energy things, but believing that there is a universal system that leads you to that conclusion. If you start to look at religion texts, you'll find that they start to look like that. So there's something in it, but it's that metaphysical flavor that is difficult for us to absorb.
You know, on that note, perhaps we should look possibly at an idea, seeing Martin, you brought good ideas, everybody's given some good ideas, and maybe next year we should have a workshop. In other words, where we can discuss this at length, and everybody can put an idea and get involved. Because we've spoken about now, and there's so many issues that are still question marks.
Of course.
So maybe it is better to hold something like that so we can really discuss it. I think that would be a super idea. Eric, again, I think a lot of us that's going in, we're not sure, but I think the subconscious mind needs to work it a little bit through. But I want to thank you for that. It's absolutely terrific. I'm sure there's some questions which probably people will ask when we're going to have some tea. But at this stage, I must thank you for during the year the lectures you've given us. but you will always be part of us. And you have agreed that we can have you again.
Yes.
And I think maybe we should not even think about it. And I'm sure a lot of things can be resolved. We're all unique. We've all got different ideas looking at it. But here's a particular system one can weigh up in the way you express yourself. So it's marvelous. What I'd like to do is say, look, we are deeply appreciated.
Well, I'd like to say thanks for listening, because it's an evolution, and as you said, there's a lot to add and to understand,
Yeah.
but it's part of sharing something where it is.
Yeah, and particularly the sharing we